About making a really gorgeous buttonhole, or as I like to call it, a super sexy buttonhole. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to work this buttonhole over 5 stitches, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to bind off 5 stitches without knitting them. We're just going to do this along the bottom here. Oh. So the working yarn is not involved. We are just slipping the stitches over one another to bind them off. And when you get to the last stitch, slide it over and then place this stitch right here over the left needle. All right, so what we have now is we have a little bound off edge here along the bottom. And now we're going to create the rest of the buttonhole. And as I mentioned, it's a couple of steps. It's a little bit fiddly, but it's so worth it when you see how gorgeous this is. So I want you to take your right needle. It's a little tricky to see, but this first stitch here, if you can kind of see where the legs are there, you want to take your right needle through from the front to the back, through those legs, wrap the working yarn around it, and bring it up through. If I get the camera back in focus there, there's my stitch. Can you see that? Then I'm going to turn it around to the back side, and I am going to use the knitted cast on method out of this stitch that I just created, and I'm going to use it purlwise by wrapping it, pulling it out, and sliding it over the needle. So there's 1, 2, 3. Oh. Okay, so I have used the knitted cast on worked purlwise to cast on 5 stitches. Now, if you count the stitch that we created on the right side, we actually have 6 extra stitches, and we only bound off 5 on the bottom, but that's okay because we're going to get rid of a stitch here in a minute. That last stitch that you just created, slide it to the right needle, which will soon be the left needle, and flip it back to the right side. We're going to take this stitch and we are going to knit it together with this stitch, but there's one more trick. First, you want to pull it nice and tight, and second, you want to swap these stitches so you'll actually have this one on top of this one. So we'll want to switch them around. Okay, there are several ways that you can swap these stitches, but here's the way I like to do it. Take your right needle and slide it under both stitches as if to knit, and slide them off. Then slide that newly cast on stitch first, then put the other stitch that was already on this left needle back onto the needle. So now you can see they're flipped across each other. They're kind of twisted. Pull your working yarn nice and tight and take your right needle and knit it down between these 2 stitches and knit them together, and you're knitting through the back loop. Okay, and so this is what we have so far. I'm going to go ahead and finish knitting across the row on this side, and when I turn it, I'll purl across the row, and then we'll take a look at what it looks like. All right, I've worked across the purl side and done another right side row, so you can see how nicely this button is situated, and it's nice and sturdy on both sides, and it's tacked down on the edges so it doesn't leave a gap. And using this little trick, you can create some super sexy buttonholes that really hold up well and have a nice, tidy little finish. Enjoy!